Welcome to the European Youth Event Online. My name is Lana Pasic. I'm a Youth Research and Policy Officer at the partnership between the European Commission and the Council of Europe in the field of youth. This week, we were supposed to be in Strasbourg at the European Parliament for the I-2020. However, we are continuing many of the conversations and discussions online in the context of Europeans Against COVID campaign. You can leave your comments and questions during these conversations in the chat, but also if you're following this event later, you can contribute still through the portal European Youth Ideas, where there is a specific platform on your visions of Europe after the pandemic. Today, we are having this conversation in the context of the study on social inclusion, digitalization, and young people, which was conducted by the Youth Partnership last year and published this year. And the study showed that while digital tools can be an important tool to help with the social inclusion of young people, digitalization also seems to further exacerbate the existing inequalities from the offline to the online world. And the context of the current COVID-19 pandemic has shown even more that the inequalities that exist seem to be even more prominent in the online world. So today we have with us to talk about this important topic two of the authors of the study, Adina Serban and Veronica Stefan. And since the start of the pandemic, they have also worked on taking some of the findings from the study and looking at some of the digital tools and platforms within the current context. And this week, the article was published on youth inclusion, digital solutions, and global pandemic. So I will be handing over to Veronica and Adina to discuss some of the challenges that became even more prominent in the current context over the last 2 months, looking at particularly the challenges related to accessibility to internet, accessibility to digital tools, but also the areas which impact young people's lives, such as education, employment, health and mental health, but also internet safety. So on to you.
Thank you, Lana. Hello, everyone. And yeah, welcome to the wonderful event where, our role somehow would be just to reflect on what's happening now, because come on, no one was prepared for what happened now. And even when we were drafting the study, we were thinking about the challenges that young people, youth policy makers, or youth researchers, the wonderful triangle of youth, would face somehow in the digital world, but no one would expect that in less than 2 months, almost everything would be online, including this event. As you said, we were preparing our travel details for Strasbourg, and here we are, 2 of us in Romania, 1 in Strasbourg, and running this webinar for whomever would join from wherever in Europe, who knows. Yeah, as you said, we somehow look back at our study, and luckily we are also still in contact with a big group of young people and asking them as well what's happening with you at the moment, and what's happening with you online and offline, and if your offline world really went on the online one, and what's left somehow. That's why we tried to look at those topics that we thought, and of course rechecked with them, that would be relevant to and for young people, and to see what response did they get, the needs and the challenges from the state and non-state actors, and of course what's still there, because it would be wonderful to speak of all the challenges that were covered, but we know, all of us, that there's still a lot that both NGOs and policymakers, and also, yeah, why not, young people should be active in developing, so that to respond to these youth needs. So this is why we did approach few of these topics that Lana was mentioning earlier, and we'll try somehow to go one by one. And what would be really appreciating would be to interact a bit with the audience, and yeah, if you young people are there watching our webinar, to tell us what's happening, yeah, to tell us what's still there, what you're missing from your previous reality, because the new world would definitely look differently. And this is why we looked at the existing data. Of course, not enough, because come on, the youth researchers were not ready to collect all this information, but to see before who was using the online world and its benefits and opportunities, and who was out of this online world. And this is why, if we look at the figures, we say that only 1% of young people never used internet. But again, we always keep in our mind that we spoke of those one who were lucky enough to be interviewed. Yeah, so the ones whom we could really find and ask, so have you used internet, yes or not? But we know that there are many other young people who were not there being asked, and we don't exactly know if this 1% is real. Yeah. And speaking of that, we are of course thinking of all these accessibility matters, because maybe you didn't use it because you didn't have internet, you didn't have a smartphone, you didn't have connection, you didn't have the skills. But what if you could not access it because, yeah, lucky, and you were somehow unlucky and life put some challenges that you could not overpass? And this is why we're also thinking, if all these digital tools were really accessible to all young people, no matter what the challenges that they're facing in their life. Of course, that 1% that we were speaking before the pandemic, now who knows, what the percent is, thinking of even those young people who had, some opportunities to access the online world. But still, there are some risks. They would have brothers and sisters who need to go online for school as well, and then they would have to share the same tablet or computer, or they used to have somehow access to the gadgets that their parents were using. But yeah, parents who were lucky enough to keep their jobs within all this global crisis, they have to work from home as well. So there's this question, well, what about you young people? If you'd have to still go online, would you have all this access to the gadgets that you used to have before? It's not only for fun nowadays. Because somehow from what we collected, we saw that before the pandemic, most of young people used to go online for fun, yeah, mostly, and to access the all these social media, the fancy Instagram, TikTok, wherever, because there are still a lot of channels that young people use and we are not that familiar with. But yeah, now you have to go online, yeah, to somehow keep the track with your educational path or to find a job. So who knows what you need it for. And this is why we know that there's plenty of questions related to access, and these challenges somehow have to be responded by everyone. Yeah, so as we were mentioning, by policymakers, by researchers trying to understand better where are young people at the moment, and also by youth NGOs who are still challenged by all these crises, some of them managing to move their activities in the online world, while the others unfortunately had to close down their youth work services. And this is why, as we told you, we try to collect some practices, and of course to identify where possible some tools and practices, and we'll be sharing some of them with you. But we know that it's a lot out there related to access that still needs to be researched upon. And I'm passing now the floor to Veronica, who'd be introducing a bit more challenges, but also responses to what's happening now in terms of access.
Thank you, Adina, and thank you all for being here. I've seen that the chat is already moving and comments and questions are showing up. And I think we are somehow on the same page. I've seen a comment mentioning that we cannot all live on WhatsApp groups and consider that as our digital or online experience. Something more has to be to that. But I think some of the problems, those that are already seen in the figures, were seen before, but somehow we didn't see or didn't look at the data. Because right now we are speaking a lot about two things: access to internet and access to technology. What we are actually feeling even more than these two is the way we have used technology. And this is the part of data that we had before. And this is also some of the very little data that we have showcased, because it's much more and there are different levels we have looked. So yeah, maybe young people have used internet, but it's also a matter of question, where did they use the internet? Many of them use it on the mobile phones because it's obvious they were enjoying that. It's more accessible, it's more affordable. But how much of the content was actually accessible and tailored to mobile phones? And now we are speaking about content as educational content, public digital services. How were we all ready for this? And we were not, obviously. That is not just for the youth sector, but for the world at large. And particularly, we should be looking at what government, schools, public institutions were ready to do, how fast they were to respond to these challenges, how many of them were crisis responses, and how many were actually ready to embrace all this digital new narrative. Digital was there, but the pressure on it was too much. I mean, even consider that where internet existed, its usage increased about 30 or 50% in different countries. So we were not ready for that. We didn't have the content, we didn't have the resources. What did concern us was the fact that the things that we could have addressed before, where digital could have been a priority, where tools could have been already in use and used in this blended approach between online and offline, were not. And that was related to health. Young people were using the internet, but not so much for looking for health information, for applying for jobs, for communicating with teachers and students through education platforms. So how did we imagine that just like that, in 1 second, everyone turned very literate and proficient in using digital tools? And probably the data that we will continue to explore and the solutions that we'll continue to explore will highlight always these problems. What we have, and this is important to remember, what we have successfully used was to adapt to the challenge and use the existing generic platforms. So whatever you used for a conferencing tool, you tried at least now to implement it. And I know this is not news for most of you, but it is important to know that this was also part of that crisis response. So we didn't have to invent. We just started to use some of the tools now more than before. And that is perfectly normal, because probably at the end of the day, what was the main aim of youth workers, social workers, educators at large, was to keep in touch with the young people, not lose track of them, and not lose that personal touch in whatever way was possible. But now we can also look a little bit more in depth. Problems to technology will not be solved by the end of the year, unfortunately, and I think it is important to speak more about specific resources and solutions, as more and more discussions are related to the fact that schools might continue to be online. Our entire lives for 1 year or so might still be very much depending on the digital platforms. So I propose we move to the next topics, and the next topics relate to education. Adina?
Thank you, Veronica. And I was just looking at the comments and questions, and thank you very much for being with us. Why education was the first one? Well, there's everything is about education, in fact, and somehow when drafting the article, we're thinking a bit that because both me and Veronica are Romanian, based in Romania, thinking a bit of what happened here, because it was a decision on Friday that the schools would close, and from Monday, the teachers that really wanted to continue doing their work, they had to move directly to finding a solution to still deliver their teaching activities to the students that they used to work with. So they had the weekend to get trained, and who's been training you in all these years, where there were some initiatives, but at the moment you would say, well, school would not be digital all of a sudden, and look that it came digital all of a sudden. You need to find the equipment and somehow get in contact with your students, and also with trying to find a solution for the ones who didn't have the tools or the skills, because I'm not thinking of the very young students who still needs assistance to follow the Zoom event, so maybe parents who were challenged and tried to help their kids to be online. And some of them on Monday, they started delivering their activities online. But of course, there were still some who could not respond to that, because it was somehow the emergency teaching solution that came into force. So it was a couple of weeks when some of them were able to do their lessons, so their students were following, while the others were somewhere out there. And no one, would be asking what's happening there. And then the ministry came and said, well, all teachers should somehow get back to their students. And, there's always the question, did they all manage to go online? And if they managed to do that, what about their students? Were they able to follow it? And, it's all with questions nowadays, because, of course, we are not only questioning somehow if all teachers or students were able to go online, but we're also questioning a bit the quality of the teaching process, because all of a sudden everyone turned to be Zoom guru. Yeah, so we're all online, being able to share screens, being able to follow. So what's next? Yeah. So that's why somehow we thought of who was online before. And if we're looking at the statistics, only 15% of young people were doing online courses before. And now, you know, what would be the percent? And thinking as well, because we were thinking of state and non-state actors. Yeah, so we have these wonderful teachers and educators who are able to move online. We have all the safety nets, including families and maybe some NGOs who are able to support. What about the other state actors, where the local council being able to support schools somehow, or private donors to be involved with that? So when it comes to education, there's of course an open question: who's there and what's happening in the online world? Again, coming back to the matters of access, are all these lessons accessible? And now, of course, we're also thinking of groups who would need additional support. Yeah, so I'm thinking of my wonderful visually impaired peers, or the ones who have the hearing problems. Are they able to be the Zoom gurus in 2 weeks or something? But of course, it's not only questions and negative things, but there's also the positive side, because if you're going online, you'll find brilliant resources that were put online by the European institutions, or of course by non-governmental organizations, or by wonderful groups of teachers. And you'd probably find them at the European level, national, and would be really grateful if you could share them, some of them, from the local level, so from your working community as well. And here I'm passing the floor to Veronica to go to the examples a bit.
Thank you, Adina. I will share my screen again once every now and then. By the way, you should understand that all this research we have put together and all these ideas come from all the collected information we have seen are from young people, experts, news even, because otherwise there is no research done on the impact of the crisis or of the lockdown so far. And this is something we should aim for. We don't have it yet. So we are just assuming something, we are comparing with previous data. And in terms of the impact have been enormous because of the lockdown in particular. So in many cases, school became compulsory, even if it was in the online. And this is just the UNESCO Global Monitor to have a glimpse at the peak of the lockdown, basically 1.6 billion learners. It's a lot, 91.3 of the world enrolled learners. So it was a huge impact. And that's why the effects are even bigger. Probably the bigger discussion will be, and will still stay with us, related to the skills of the young people and skills of educators, professors, so on and so forth. The issue is we could not and we will not be able to solve it in half a year or 1 year, because the problem was there. And even relying so much on conferencing tools is not exactly online learning. And this is the difference that we make in the article as well, because remote distance learning, yeah, as we are doing it right now, it's just part of the process. Online learning, or even complemented in the blended learning, would entail several things: videos, live conferencing, tasks that are designed for digital tools. And here comes the question we were discussing about. The resources are there. We have put in the article also resources that you might be aware of. Some are provided by the European Commission, where basically they have aggregated hundreds of resources created for different funding programs, and Erasmus Plus and different platforms that they already manage. They're just put together, so you can always go to that. Council of Europe has done something similar. UNESCO has done something similar. Another interesting platform, though, for many of you, also because many of the platforms and the tools available here are in English. It's provided for the Education Nation, which was originally started by Estonia, but then also joined by various Nordic and Baltic countries, where they have put many of their resources available for free. It is important to know that in terms of accessibility, some of these platforms before were not for free, were not available for everyone, but now they are. These tools will go through a different range of technologies and target groups they address. So it can be children, young people, it can be for creative purposes, but it can be also for pedagogical use. I know that my screen is rather small, but all these links are already provided in the article, so do not worry. But they can also be used by educators and youth experts to be more proficient in using similar tools. So you don't really have to create them, and you don't have to stick to the conferencing and messaging apps. You can go beyond that and you can experiment. Of course, without support or a guided process, this might not be so easy, but these resources exist. So if at least we were not aware of them, we can use it now. Some other platforms we have put together come again from different countries. I've chosen this one from Estonia, and the reason I chose it because many organizations actually manage to put together trainers and youth workers and somehow guide them as much as they could through the online platforms to what could be done in terms of mobility, in terms of youth participation, and many others. But some have provided, and this was really dependent on the possibility of having this platform before the crisis, and that is the platform we have right now, EduHub. It's developed in Belarus, if I'm not wrong. And they do offer certified training courses, so it's really e-learning that they provide. Many of these pages you will see they're translated in English, but originally not all of them are in English, so probably not all of them or any of them are available in English, but they do serve as inspiration for you. So either you could look for similar ones in your national countries, or you could use these to develop them. Probably we are at the point we should think more of investing in developing new ones, getting inspired of those that actually work and serve our purposes instead of reinventing the wheel too much. I think with this can move to the, I did want to show you something else, and that is there are some other repositories. So again, it's very difficult to find all the platforms in one place, but once in a while with different projects, we have managed to go through different resources. DG Youth is one of these portals, very useful, very much recommended to you, that basically aggregates different resources that have been created, very generic ones, but also very specific ones. And this is just digital tools with the different topics they address, and they are provided with a short description with links to the platforms. Many of them are open source or free to use. So again, what we have put in the article could guide you a little bit more. In many cases might be a little bit too much to digest, but starting from somewhere or diversifying our approaches could be one of the ways of doing it.
Thank you, Veronica. Maybe before going further into the other topic, just briefly to look at some of the comments and questions we have on the topic of education. So there have been some comments from Manfred in terms of talking about how the teachers, trainers, and students are expected to now move online. However, there is a question if normally we are asking these people to have the skills and capabilities to teach and or learn online. I think we have all been spending a lot of time on different tools and platforms, but I can say that we have all found it challenging for one way or another, for one reason or another, to actually use them within the education context. So there has been that, and then also a question from Marius looking at the quality impact of online teaching. As you have said, that the teachers have kind of been forced to move their activities online and get through to their students in that way. But the question is as well, how much of the knowledge is transferable within such a short period of time online?
Well, I can start reflecting on this. First, to Manfred's point, well, they didn't have the skills, and actually even in the article and in the study and in general, whatever statistics you have related to digital skills, it will show you the huge gap we have. So in terms of adults, we have around 43% of all adults in the EU only that don't have basic digital skills. So basic digital skills means at least the capacity to use it in a more purposeful way. So I don't think we had the debate so strongly. We had a debate on the importance of blended learning, of standards in education, but not so much of the mandatory use of digital tools in any of these. Also because in any of the European context, Council of Europe, the EU, this is not a competence that goes directly to there. It's really depending on the national government and how much youth workers or young people themselves have been involved in designing these frameworks. Now, this is a discussion to have. Adina?
Well, I was looking at both questions / comments that Marius and Manfred addressed as well, and starting with the one that Marius was asking. Of course, it's possible and it would be normal to look at the quality in all these activities, but I have another question. Would be someone very happy to see the results? Because thinking of the impact, we should also know where we started from. And as we said, it's only 1% of young people who are reported of not using on internet before, but who knows how many out there were not really asked about that. So thinking of the impact, well, for the impact, you should know where's the baseline, you should define indicators, and you should see what's happening afterwards. So we are somehow missing the starting point. And frankly speaking, because of course all this pandemic somehow made me being even more frank than I was before, it would be a very sad image. And I'm not sure if policymakers or practitioners or everyone would be really happy to see what's happening out there, especially when you speak of quality. Because I also have the tendency somehow to think that if people were asked to do things, and now thinking now of teachers, they would do them, they would report that they did them, but no one would do a follow-up. So I'm wondering how many institutions or experts would look at the reports that they're being provided with and really look for the quality somehow. And it's not enough only to look at the quality, but also to support those people. And now I'm speaking of teachers and educators who need still support. So as Manfred was saying, we needed a crisis to understand that in order for teachers and educators to be able to provide the online digital activities, they would need to be trained beforehand. And also, I'm also thinking of the very general set of knowledge and information that's being transmitted to students and learners. Well, if you don't have a Profi Zoom account, you have 40 minutes where you as an educator should be able to transfer everything that you prepare to everyone. And I'm now thinking that we're speaking of mainstream education and of having education accessible to everyone. So I doubt that in 40 minutes you'd be able to transfer all the content in an accessible manner for everyone. And thinking now of young people or students or adults, wherever, dealing with learning difficulties. So what about them? They are part of a very general Zoom-based webinar activity, whatever, and they would have to follow it. So in terms of numbers, they were there, but what about the outcomes and what's happening next? So there's still questions that we need to address. But measuring, of course, it's possible.
Yeah, I think also we are having many questions that are coming out of the current situation, and even though the research has been done on many of these topics, we found even last year that we are missing some of the information and some of the things were not available. And I think for the questions that are rising now, we have even fewer data. So yeah, it is something to keep in mind, and also for future research purposes, but then also what to do with the results afterwards. Okay, so back to you. I think we are moving on now from education to the next topic. So yeah.
Yeah, we are moving to education, from education to employment. And here, we were somehow thinking that would come with only miracles and with great practices. But again, there's a lot of work that we all need to be doing there, because somehow we look for the statistics and saw that in the first month of the lockdown, 6% of people indicated that they've lost their jobs. Well, temporary jobs or permanent jobs that they had. And it was because of the lockdown and somehow because of the fact that the world looks different at the moment. And again, when coming to young people, we were trying to understand how were they using internet for employment and professional development before. And of course, to thinking as well that not all young people were really working with these digital tools. So that's why, of course, that it was great for the ones who were able to use telework to keep their jobs. But what about the others who could not move in the digital world and keep their jobs there? So there's still the question of how many people like really lost their jobs, and of course that for the young graduates, their opportunities to find a job in the upcoming months would be dramatically reduced. And there's always the question, with needs, because we always speak of them, and in a crisis situation, we always come back to them somehow, trying to understand if their situation is even worse than it used to be before. But of course, there were a lot of resources in the online world that some people were not using, and thinking now of tools that help them to draft CVs or to find a job. And there were other tools that were developed by European national or local initiatives trying to help young people find better employment opportunities. And now I'm passing the floor to Veronica for great examples that we found out.
Thank you, Adina. I will keep sharing this at the screen. Well, you will have to understand here, and specifically for employment, it's not so easy to find so many platforms, mostly because they are dependent on several things. So basically what still happens is that most of us and most of the employers relied on pre-existing platforms, such as the generic ones. The conferencing is just an example, but it's more than that. So you always have the collaboration tools, the online documents, the online calendars, other program and task management that allow you to do better, to coordinate the groups. But I will mention around the conferencing part, Discord, particularly for youth workers. If you are not yet there, try to use that kind of a platform, because it's also a place where you can already find young people and engage them in our activities, mostly because it was still used mostly by gamers. So young people would be there, and it's a natural platform to be there. So maybe you might consider replacing your WebEx or Zoom tool with that. But then, of course, there are many others. Some other applications have appeared at national level, and they have been used depending on the company or the institutions you are working in. So here we are not going to provide that many examples because they're really internal. What we have found interesting still from the previous platforms existing before the crisis was the fact that some of them were helping already young people to get some experience and to get engagement with the labor market. And I have chosen a few of them. In the study that Lana has already shared with you can find even some short description in the body of the study, but also in the appendix. Three of them I have chosen. One is AHA, from Austria. What is interesting is that it enables young people to experience with social work through a gamified approach. So probably future youth workers, social workers can get through that through a very nice experience, and organizations can join it as well. So maybe more platforms like this could be useful as well. Another useful one, which particularly is addressed or was used for young people with disabilities, is VIVET, which is a virtual internship in vocational education and training, where they have created an environment to both monitor and interact with your interns. Again, this was a pilot project implemented in various countries, including with ownership of Belarus, funded with Erasmus+. It's important to mention it. And the last example, and there are similar other ones to this one, this is a mobile application. The benefit of this application is that particularly links young people with the labor market. So you probably have seen e-jobs platforms where everyone can apply, but this one is particularly addressed to young people, providing them with information on approaches how to learn, how to create their own company, enterprise. So it can be really, really useful. Now I will stop here with the employment ones because we'll have many other interesting platforms to share. As highlighted, unfortunately, most of us do rely on the open platforms that exist and not so much on very specifically youth-tailored. But I would encourage you, and we have provided in the article, to read more about the impact that the crisis has had and might have, especially for those young people not in employment, education, or training, as this crisis will create even more from that category. Moving on to the next category, Adina.
Yeah, the next category, of course, it comes also with a lot of challenges, and it's about health and mental health. I think that we've been pretty challenged here because except for the access to services, which of course would be easier to measure thinking of the access you had before. So if you're part of a group exposed to risk, of course that your access to medical services, it was somehow hard to get. And even now, when you were not able to move, to travel to the closest medical center, of course that it was even harder. So of course that would leave some effects that would be hard to tackle. So except for the access to the medical services that young people did not have before, or the situation got even worse, we're also somehow trying to check that with young people, asking them about their well-being. And personally working with a group in the one of the villages in Romania, I was asking them, so what's missing there? And they said, well, I miss hugging, I miss people. Of course, I have these digital opportunities to send a hug online, but I somehow feel affected by the fact that I cannot meet people and I cannot go see them. And well, one of them that, you know, when I got the answer, I was like, okay, what kind of answer is that? But then I thought that that's really important. One of the girls told me that she would miss the prom and the fancy event they were supposed to have in June. And of course that, you know, as sometimes you think, well, that's not an issue, and then you understand that it's an issue for them because they were preparing for 4 years to join this event. And so I somehow feel depressed that then I'm deprived of being part of this fancy event. So when it comes to well-being, we understand that it's a whole universe that young people had there, and they would expect that their life would look somehow in the upcoming months, and all of a sudden the crisis changed their expectations somehow. But of course that there were a lot of young people who, yeah, unfortunately had some um, barriers in accessing the medical services that they had before. And I'm thinking of HIV positive young people who might not have the access to treatment, or the ones who were supposed to go have a surgery, and due to the emergency or the state of alert situation could not go and follow their medical procedures. And it was another issue that we also spent some time reflecting upon, and that was related to domestic violence. Because if you'd go online, you'd find a lot of information about the rise of the domestic violence and of the aggression that's happening there, and of the authorities who are not prepared to respond to that, and of different types of aggression that were not there before. And of course, it was the lockdown situation, so how to go interfere in all these family settings. So that's why we try to look for some practices that were there before, but maybe people and young people were not accessing before, thinking of these helplines. Yeah, so nowadays they started to use them, or to some of the tools and instruments that were put in place by the authorities in order to respond to the challenges that young people face in terms of the access to health and mental health support. So I'm passing now the floor to Veronica, who has the wonderful links open to share them with you.
Yes, we do. Well, the health part, it's ironically some that was promoted and is not affecting young people so much because they were not affected about the virus in terms of direct sickness. But the way it impacted them, it was obvious. It would be enormous, particularly on the very low-served communities, isolated communities. We talk about communities, we know electricity or water or anything of the kind. The data we have put here, again, it stays for you because it's about facts we are already talking. So it's not assumptions that mental health has increased and has put the pressure because we are just tired with all the conferencing and all the tasks we get from our teachers or youth workers. It's a fact that has been measured. Young people feel more depressed. Actually, according to the World Health Organization Index on well-being, about 50% of young people feel very overwhelmed about the situation. So probably their prospects for the future are less good in a way. Domestic violence, unfortunately, it's a topic that we'll not touch so much, but again, data has emerged that violence against children, young people, young girls in particularly, but also on other minority groups has increased. We will have to see it will keep increasing like that. In terms of solutions, well, we do have some interesting one, and I totally recommend the study. And I have chosen here an Estonian example, mostly because this platform they have put together, it's an ensemble of other platforms and tools that are provided, from solutions for young people, for specialists, for parents as well, related to health, mental health as well. They link you to how to find psychologists, offering free resources and consultations for that matter, doing it online, privately, sometimes with 24/7 support. So at any time of the day or the night, you feel depressed or you feel the need to discuss with someone, these platforms were there. Also, what some of these platforms, this one in particular, because this is also part of the original Estonian platform I was showing, is offering peer support, so chat rooms and other discussions for people sharing more or less the same situation. So it can be young parents, people who are losing families during this time, people that feel different kind of pressures. And I think there was a question particularly about young parents. Well, we don't necessarily have a platform just for that, but some of these do address parents as well. Parents in how to support young people, or parents how to get support for themselves. And personally, I have seen lots of videos and reportage mentioning the depression of young mothers, overwhelmed 4 or 5 children around, with also the fact that they also had to deal with education. She had to deal with her own job done remotely. So, of course, not taking into account the lack of intergenerational support that was becoming the norm during this time. But data is still not so much there. Now, the data we have, including the study, it's related to the Eurofound analysis that compares data for both young people and the overall population. Feel free to explore it. We should look in particular solutions probably. Now I will just continue a little bit with other youth platforms, and this would be a Finnish platform. It's a chat room. It's as basic as it gets, and that's why I want to use it as, I don't know, maybe inspiration for some of you, as it just, what it does, it just opens the chat and allows you. I haven't pointed so much, but actually mentioned that it has a schedule, and it is quite overwhelming during this time for them. So basically, young people, wherever these platforms are available, are actually using them. And another one, just the very last one, this is the Ukrainian one, mobile apps. Mobile apps are very popular, very friendly. And even when there is no specific mobile app, I will go back to our original article. Many of these tools that have been there before, you will see, can be used. So whatever mobile application you used before can still be used for this purpose as well. In terms of combating domestic violence, this was part of the solution. While, of course, what we can see now, also other public services are turning online. We'll see if they stay after that, like court hearings that are online, obtaining protection orders, and so on and so forth. And now we can move to information and counseling.
Just a brief reflection from my side as well to add to these, because these are some of the platforms at the national level, but we have also seen around Europe basically different therapists also offering online therapy sessions. So if there are young people who are looking for those as well, it does not have to be at the European level or national level. Locally as well, therapists are trying to help out and also to move their services online. And I think the question and comment raised by Manfred as well kind of emphasizes the importance of looking at the variety and diversity of young people, and the note on young parents as well kind of raises all different issues and different questions regarding this pandemic. Okay, so Adina, I guess on the next topic.
Yes, yeah. Well, I was now reading again Manfred's comment when, well, I'm mother of a toddler who's doing his best to be part of all the webinars and the online meetings that his parents have. And if he's not able to do that, it's a crisis because he refuses to see digital things and gadgets. So it's stress for parents and for kids as well. Yeah, so part of the information and counseling, I think that this part goes very well with the comment that you, Lana, had before. So there's some services that some experts and practitioners were able to move in this online world. So if we speak of therapists and maybe some social workers and educators, but there are still a lot of young people who didn't even benefit of these services before. So if you were living in if you in a community that didn't really have all these services, now it's even the lockdown and you don't have access to those poor services that used to be there before. So that's another issue. So there were a lot of young people who didn't have access to information or counseling services before, and now it's even worse. Of course, for the ones who had, either they liked it or not, they had to somehow get used to benefit of some of these services online and to look for some of them, because we were earlier speaking of all the stress that the pandemic caused and all the emotional stress that young people had to face. So that's why we try to look for some of the platforms. But when it comes to information and counseling, I think that the inventory, it's there, an open list, and we really hope that at the beginning of autumn, when we go back to the list, we'd be able to populate it, and hope that the state and non-state actors would be even more active in developing this information and counseling services for young people. So Veronica will be sharing few of the examples that we found out.
I think a little bit we have touched on this, because whatever we are discussing about, either it's health or employment or education, these platforms have been used. In this case, more or less, we are discussing about platforms that existed before the crisis. What I would dare say here that the effort done by youth workers and educators has been consistent, and we have seen the support and the synergies created by a lot of stakeholders. So it can be counselors, it can be schools that have tried to move online their counseling services, which is something to appreciate. They maybe they don't know how to do it in a different way, but they still keep doing this, so they struggle. And probably here is a quite important difference between teachers that use a messaging app just to pass lessons or I know other tasks to be done at home to children and young people without checking too much. And it's a totally different approach from the educators and counselors and youth workers that actually took a more tailored approach just by using those platforms or the same platform. So you can use conferencing and WhatsApp for many things you want in different ways, but the approach, the way you do it, probably it's something that cannot be so easily learned during the crisis, as it's very much linked to the core values that you already have as youth or as social workers. So probably there should be also in the attention, it's not just about the tools, it's about the people that do it, and their other skills adding to the digital ones. The two platforms that I have chosen are quite interesting ones. One comes from Belgium, What, and this is the kind of platform that guides young people through a lot of issues. So basically, everything is there, from mental health to corona, to problems at homes, eating, bullying, creating your own business. So whatever you want, it's there. It's really complete. It's a 360 degrees platform. If we could have that in each country, I think that would be very useful. Also, imagining that in counseling in particular, you need to have a platform that is addressed in your own language. So more than using any other international platform, you have to be comfortable and feel comfortable in talking to that person. Kelimi is a platform for Malta. It's very much focused on rights of young people, but also offering other opportunities. So these are just two examples that they put there. But again, go back to the article and the study where we have put more. Also, many of the platforms mentioned in the health section, but also in information counseling, could provide services in different areas. So probably those in health provide a lot of information and counseling support. Most of those chats can be used in all contexts. That would be it from my side.
Great, thank you. And then we're moving on to the topic on safety and security online, and because this has also been one of the very important questions and topics in the last, well, now already 2.5 months.
I think that with this topic, we were somehow lucky, thinking now of the youth workers, for example, who had the wonderful opportunity to be part of different online and offline events happening within the no hate speech campaign. So it was something there, and at least some knowledge and manuals were available. But during the pandemic, like who knows what your kid is doing online? So it's challenging parents who should understand better what's happening in and with the online world, as well as young people who, as we spoke earlier, regarding all this emotional stress, might be victims or exposed to the risk, and of course that they need specialized support to understand better what's happening and what's happening in the online world, because unfortunately there's not only a wonderful image, there's a lot of aggression in the online world as well. And yeah, for the educators who are not still trained on that, so you'd be organizing some activities, but within the sessions that you're running, young people might access other links as well, so they might be victims while you're trying to do a great educational activity. So in terms of security and risk, there's a lot of work that we all, and going back to the triangle, should be doing. So policymakers and youth workers and educators directly and researchers. So to see where are we at the moment and what we still need to provide to young people to feel safe in the online world. So again, a bit of example that Veronica will be sharing from what we collect.
I would underline, though, that indeed some of the things were known before, some are not. Security is one of the things that is usually disregarded in a way. It's seen like something else additional to the digital world, where not. It's actually essential for the digital world, and I think we are seeing a lot of problems right now with many conferencing platforms, like the general open ones, particularly those that have been used excessively during this time, being attacked and exposing children and young people to unpleasant abuse. It happened to me just yesterday, and trust me, even if you are an adult and you are aware that it might come, the discomfort and the stress it's creating is very, very unpleasant. And on the one hand, we deal with security issues. On the other hand, we deal with side effects, if you want, the cyberbullying, the hate speech, and platforms for this we had before, but this has to be an essential skill developed for each and every youth worker, and it has to be part of the education of each child and young people. The two platforms I have chosen here are just as an example, because what does happen is that many of you have them available in your own countries. You have them through the Safer Internet Centers. They are part of a wider European program. So I chose two. One is Be Smart Online for Malta. Most of them rely on the same similar tools, helpline and hotlines, and general information of what to do, how to do, where to do, what to look at, how to train yourself. This one is the Romanian version, more or less, but it's also relying on influencers, ensuring their stories and make sure that young people relate to them. What I have used, we have shared with you, and I will just briefly present it. Some guidebooks, guidelines, let's say, that you can use in dealing with different issues. The information is here, you have to go through it, but I will touch a little bit on data protection, as I have seen mentioned. How do you actually make sure that young people trust the platforms you use? Well, this is a matter of responsibility and the way we communicate all these issues. So it has to be on educating young people and educating grown-ups as well, as not looming too much over the young people, or not using their data in ways they shouldn't. Because right now we are living in a society that we actually don't trust each other so much, and technology sometimes is not helping. But particularly when identifying obstacles in a different research that I'm doing, young people have identified a problem during this lockdown: access to internet, quality of internet, price of internet, but then problems as trust in security and trust in data. So they are afraid of data breaches. Never neglect that problem. Some solutions are here, some tools are there, so you can use them as checkbook. Go there and see what you can do. Make sure that you have your own internal procedures, if you want to, like how to deal with data with young people and children, how to expose them, how not to expose them. Please double check any kind of resource you are using. Don't trust it as being safe by default or just because it's free either. So I think those are the points we should be aware of. And that would be with the security from my side.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Veronica. I have been checking. There are no further comments or questions, so I think we can slowly wrap it up also given the time. And I think some of the things that still remain for us are the questions for the future. So just to highlight that these areas or these topics have been selected based on what we have received from the study last year, but there are also many other issues in young people's lives that have arisen during this pandemic, but were also existent before, and also platforms and solutions that have been there and are still developing. So for us, I think the questions will still remain. How are some of these questions going to be addressed at the local level, at the national level, at the European level? What are going to be some of the policy responses that we are hopefully going to see during this year? But then also, what is the future of education for young people, but also for the educators? What are some of the challenges and solutions when it comes to employment and skills? As well as what are going to be the long-term consequences on mental health, but also health, and what are going to be some of the ways in which the world is going to be dealing with the health situation. So I will leave all of these questions out there, and I invite all of the guests as well to leave the questions in the comments. We are still going to be taking some questions and responding to them after this video is finished. And the video will also be available at the Facebook page of the European Youth Event, but also shared through the Youth Partnerships Facebook, as well as later our YouTube channel and on our website. We also invite you again to have a look at the European Youth Ideas platform and leave some of the comments there and some of the questions. I have gone through some of them yesterday, and I really look forward to reading more. It's really interesting for us also to hear what young people are saying, because yesterday, as we discussed, many of the online events are happening during the school hours as well, and then it might be difficult for young people to be following live. Thank you again. Thank you to the speakers, to Adina and Veronica. Thank you to the European Parliament for giving us a platform to speak about this important topic. And there is also going to be a survey, and the link to the survey is in the comments. And you can respond to some of the questions and give your feedback about this event. Thank you for joining us again, and we look forward to seeing you on other occasions and other online activities.